Okay, well, let's get straight to the point, and let's just straight up ask the question that's on everybody's mind. Why are there so many damn white people in Lord of the Rings? Was Tolkien a racist? And why didn't Peter Jackson cast more diverse cast in his movies? Is Peter Jackson a racist? Seriously, what the hell is with all these white people? Well, hopefully no one actually feels that way. But if you were to listen to the cast interviews with the Rings of Power, you would basically, that seems to be what they feel, at least that's the way they talk about it. When they say things like a necessary redress of balance, it's like they're trying to find some poetic and nice way of saying, we're better now because the other stuff was too racist, and now that we have black people here, everything's better. It's like, okay, guys, let's just let's start from the beginning. J.R.R. Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings and the greater works of Middle-earth as a mythology. He was intentionally trying to replace some of the lost mythology of the English. Now, this might blow your mind, but when you write a historical mythology of a certain culture, the people in that story will probably look like the people of that culture. That's kind of how it works. If you were to, make a movie about Chinese mythology, you'd probably want to hire people, cast and crew that look like, they're from China. Just like if you were to pull a story out of African mythology, you might want to cast actual Africans, or at least someone who looks like that. It would make sense. Thus, people in the European mythology will tend to look European. That's the premise we're starting with here, okay? Okay, so now with that part out of the way, that explains why Tolkien described his characters as usually being pale-skinned, and that's why Peter Jackson cast Caucasian-looking characters in his movie, because it was European mythology. Just like any other mythology, you generally make, it's connected to history and a culture and an actual region, so you usually cast people who look like from that region. Now, the next step here is, okay, what's the actual content of this mythology that Tolkien wrote? Well, it's actually extremely multicultural, very anti-racist, and all about coming together, different cultures coming together and understanding each other in the face of a greater evil. It's kind of the whole theme of the story, pretty much, because they have all these races, the humans, elves, dwarves, and hobbits, very different races. In fact, this is more like different species. I mean, the difference between elves and humans is extreme. You think, modern people in a real world here have racial differences, because imagine if, there was a race that's literally immortal compared to a race that, lives about 100 years. You think they have... That kind of creates a different perspective on life. Anyway. So, Tolkien's themes are actually very, very anti-racist. They're all about people coming together. Just in Lord of the Rings alone, there's the story of the Legolas and Gimli overcoming their cultural differences. There was the Rohirrim and the Gondorians overcoming, some political differences to unite. And there's the Hobbits coming, realizing, hey, maybe we should get involved in the world. There's all sorts of that stuff. So, again, it's like one of the most anti-racist stories you can ever imagine. So, and also, it might blow your mind, but skin color actually isn't like the primary or only determining factor when it comes to race and culture. Europe is actually a very multicultural place. You wouldn't call all Europeans British any more than you call all Asians Chinese. That's just an ignorant thing to say. So to see a cast of, look at a group of people by their skin color and say, oh, that's culturally monogamous, is just stupid and ignorant. So let's try to grow up a little bit, shall we? Okay, so Tolkien was not racist. Lord of the Rings, not racist. Peter Jackson and his movies, not racist. But what about now? What about moving forward? We got a modern world, modern issues, representation, and that kind of thing is a big deal to a lot of people. So shouldn't we all be happy about adding diversity and representation? And in general principle, sure, why not? I mean, who's out there saying we shouldn't have more diversity in the stuff we do, you know? But like I just said about stories specific to culture and mythology and history, what's wrong with telling the reality of certain cultures? I mean, is it racist to have Chinese people cast in a story about Chinese mythology? I mean, anyway, moving past the mythology side of things, let's talk about representation. And since the concern here is racism, and we hear people talk about, well, you know, they want to see themselves in the story or in the characters. And I'm like, okay, well, in the case of Lord of the Rings, it was published like in the 50s, and it's been translated into 38 languages. It's been a bestseller for a long time, and continues to be. There's people of all ages, all generations, all countries and cultures have loved it. So apparently no one's having any trouble seeing themselves in it. When I go online and I watch reaction videos to people who are watching Lord of the Rings for the first time, I see people of every race, you know, every multiple cultures, you know, men, women, black, white, Asian, and others, and hell, even different sexualities, and everyone seems a lot like the movies. They seem to like the story. I've yet to encounter anybody who says, yeah, Aragorn's cool, but he's too white, I just don't relate. I mean, seriously? When you see an action hero beat up a bad guy and do cool stunts, do you say, well, that's cool, but too bad they look different than me? I mean, what? Really, guys? Come on now. Relatability is about being human, or universal qualities that people can connect to. I've never once watched a movie and been like, well, that's cool, but they don't look like me. So this notion that you can't empathize or connect with people unless they look like you, that's kind of like the very definition of being a racist. It's like, hey, you look different than me, so you're like an alien species to me. I can't relate to you. It's like, really? Who thinks that way? Racists do. That's who thinks that way. So it's hard to celebrate diversity when the people claiming to celebrate it are talking like abject fucking racists. So there's that. It's a kind of a thing that I find. I don't know what to say about that. And when they say things like the necessary redress of balance in reference to adding, you know, different, adding so-called diversity to the cast for Rings of Power, again, there's this backhanded assumption that the balance they're redressing is the racism of the previous versions of the story. But only a racist would see racism in those previous versions of the story. That's just the fact of the matter. It's like, I don't know what else to say about that. So is it fine that the accusation, of course, the other hot topic here is, well, clearly only people who could possibly complain about diversity being added in Rings of Power is well, they must be racist if they don't like that. Well, as I've said, that might hold water if it wasn't the cast themselves who were talking like racists. But anyway, so why would it be a problem with diversity? Well, again, when you're dealing with a cultural work, and then you're basically insulting all the older versions as if they are the racists, that kind of pisses people off. And then when you talk like racist while pretending like you're anti-racist, that just kind of infuriates people. And then when you're making a show that's like a big deal to a lot of people, and you spend more time calling them racist and saying how great you are, and you don't talk about what you think is cool about the show you're in, other than how cool it is that you're in it, well, no one's going to think that's cool. That's just how it works. So, like, if these people were coming out talking about how cool the movie was, and how cool the show was, or how much they loved Tolkien's lore and his stories, you spread love by sharing love. And I haven't heard a word of actual love for Tolkien's work come from any of the cast members. I mean, you would think that Lord of the Rings is some sort of fucking Nazi propaganda, and they're purifying it and making it worthy now because they showed up. So, that's what it comes down to, really. If these people talked like they loved the show, or loved... You show some love for Tolkien, show some love for Lord of the Rings, or at least show some love for your own show, other than loving how much you're in it. So, they could have done diversity cool. I mean, if it was really important to you to have black hobbits, black elves, and black dwarves, etc., that could have been done in ways that would have been cool, would have been not just stomping on the lore, and it would have been, I don't know, actually show that you care about trying to make a good story. But they didn't. That's not what they did. That's not what they're doing. And hey, maybe maybe it won't be as bad as all that, but I wouldn't know because I'm already checking out. I won't be watching their show.